I was 71 years old, standing quietly outside a conference room, when I heard my own grandson laughing about me. "She's finally out," he said. "No more old school nonsense." Then someone else laughed and replied, "About time. She should have retired years ago." I stood there silently, my hand still resting on the door handle, because they thought I was gone. They thought I couldn't hear them, but I heard every word, and in that moment, I realized something painful. The people I built everything for couldn't wait to replace me. My name is Evelyn Carter, and for over 40 years, I built one of the largest family businesses in our city. Not with luck, not with shortcuts, but with sacrifice. When my husband died, I was only 33 years old. 3 children, debt, a failing business, and a future that looked impossible. Everyone told me to sell the company. "You can't run this alone," they said. But they were wrong. I worked day and night, skipped vacations, missed birthdays, ignored exhaustion, because I believed one thing. One day, this company would secure my family's future, and eventually, it did. The business grew. Small office became a building. One employee became hundreds. And my children, they inherited comfort. Private schools, luxury vacations, expensive cars, everything I never had. At first, that made me proud. But success changes people, especially people who never struggled for it. My oldest son, Richard, joined the company in his 20s. Smart, confident, ambitious. Too ambitious. Then came my grandchildren, especially Tyler. Tyler believed the company belonged to him before he had earned a single thing. Expensive suits, expensive watches, big opinions, and absolutely no respect. Still, I stayed patient, because I kept telling myself, "They're family." That was my mistake. Over the years, I slowly stepped back from daily operations, not because I wanted to, but because they pushed me to. "You should relax more," Richard would say. "Enjoy retirement." Retirement? Funny word. People only tell you to retire when they want your seat. At first, I ignored it until the meetings changed. Suddenly, I stopped being included. Decisions happened without me. Emails stopped coming. Conversations ended when I walked into rooms. And then, one morning, I arrived at the office, and my assistant looked nervous. "Mrs. Carter," she said softly, "they're in the boardroom." I frowned. "Who?" She hesitated. "Your family." Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I walked toward the conference room slowly, and that's when I heard Tyler's voice. "She's old. The company needs modern leadership." Laughter. Then Richard spoke. "We'll make the announcement today." Announcement. I stood there silently, listening, and then, the sentence that changed everything. "We're removing her as CEO." Silence filled my chest. Not shock, not sadness. Something colder. Clarity. After everything I had done, after sacrificing my entire life, my own family was planning to push me out. Without even telling me, I almost opened the door, almost walked in, but I stopped myself, because suddenly, I remembered something they had completely forgotten. Years ago, when the company first started growing, my husband gave me one piece of advice: never give away complete control. And thankfully, I listened. I slowly stepped away from the door, and for the first time in years, I smiled, because they thought they were taking everything from me. But they had no idea who actually owned the company. I didn't walk into the boardroom. Not immediately. Instead, I stood there quietly outside the door, listening, because sometimes people reveal the truth when they think you no longer matter. She won't fight it, Tyler said confidently. She's too old. A few people laughed. Then Richard spoke. We'll make it sound respectful, he said. A smooth transition. Transition. Funny word. People use words like that when they're trying to hide betrayal behind professionalism. I closed my eyes for a moment, not because I was hurt, but because suddenly everything made sense. The missed meetings, the hidden emails, the forced retirement conversations. This wasn't concern. This was a takeover, and my own family was leading it. I finally opened the door. The room went silent instantly. Every face turned toward me. Tyler's smile disappeared first. Richard stood up quickly. Mo. I raised my hand slightly. Sit down, I said calmly, and surprisingly, he did. I walked slowly toward the head of the table. My chair, the same chair I had sat in for over 30 years. The same chair they were planning to take. I placed my purse on the table, sat down calmly, no anger, no shouting, because power doesn't need volume. Well, I said softly, this sounds interesting. Nobody spoke. Tyler cleared his throat first. Grandma, we were just discussing the future of the company. I looked at him carefully. The future. He nodded quickly. Yes. Modern leadership. New direction. New direction. I almost smiled. You mean without me? I replied. Silence. Richard leaned forward. Mom, this isn't personal. That sentence always means the opposite. I folded my hands calmly. You planned to remove me as CEO, I said. No one denied it. Because they couldn't. Tyler finally spoke again. The company needs younger leadership, he said confidently. Younger. Interesting. Tell me something, Tyler, I said quietly. How many nights did you sleep in your office building this company? He frowned. How many birthdays did you miss? How many risks did you take when failure meant losing everything? Silence, because he had no answer. He inherited success. He never built it. Richard tried to step in. Mom, nobody is disrespecting what you've done. But you are, I interrupted softly. The room froze again, because my voice had changed. It wasn't emotional anymore. It was controlled. Dangerously controlled. I gave this family everything, I continued, and instead of gratitude, I looked around the table. You prepared a meeting to erase me. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Then suddenly, one of the board members spoke. Mrs. Carter, legally, the board can vote on leadership changes. I turned toward him slowly. You're absolutely right, I said. For a moment, Tyler smiled again. Big mistake. However, I continued calmly, there's one small detail everyone here seems to have forgotten. Confusion spread across the room. I opened my purse, pulled out a folder, and placed it on the table. Majority ownership, I said quietly. Richard's face changed instantly. Tyler frowned. What does that mean? He asked. I looked directly at him. It means, I replied, I still control the company. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Richard grabbed the papers quickly, started reading, and then his face lost color. No, he whispered. I leaned back calmly. Yes. Years ago, when the company expanded internationally, I quietly bought back controlling shares. Not because I expected betrayal, but because your grandfather once told me, never hand over power completely. And thankfully, I listened. Tyler stood up suddenly. This is insane. No, I said softly. This is ownership. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because in that moment, the entire room realized the truth. They weren't removing me. They never had the power to. And for the first time in years, my family looked at me, not like an old woman, but like the person who built everything. The room stayed silent. Nobody argued. Nobody moved. Because the truth had finally landed. I still controlled the company. Completely. Tyler looked furious. Richard looked terrified. And the rest of the board, uncomfortable. Because suddenly, the meeting they thought was a takeover had become a disaster. Tyler slammed his hand against the table. This is manipulation, he snapped. I looked at him calmly. No, I replied. This is preparation. He opened his mouth again, but Richard stopped him. Enough, Richard whispered sharply. Tyler stared at his father in disbelief. What do you mean enough? She hid this from us. I almost smiled. Interesting. They called it hiding when it protected me, but they called it leadership when they tried to remove me in secret. Funny how that works. I stood up slowly. The room immediately became still again. For decades, my presence had controlled rooms without effort. And today, they remembered why. I spent 40 years building this company, I said calmly. My voice echoed softly through the boardroom. I sacrificed time, health, and family moments. I paused briefly, so my children and grandchildren would never struggle. Richard lowered his eyes. Tyler stayed angry, but underneath that anger, I could finally see it. Fear, because, for the first time in his life, money and power were no longer guaranteed. You all thought age made me weak, I continued. I looked directly at Tyler, but experience, I paused, is the reason this company still exists. Silence. Then one of the board members spoke carefully. Mrs. Carter, what happens now? That question changed the room, because suddenly, everyone understood. I was still the one making decisions, not Richard, not Tyler. Me. I walked slowly toward the large window overlooking the city, the same city I helped build my business in. Years ago, I used to stand there with my husband, planning our future, dreaming, fighting to survive. And now, my own family had almost turned that dream into greed. I turned back toward the table. Richard, I said softly. He looked up immediately. When did you stop seeing me as your mother? I paused, and start seeing me as an obstacle. His eyes filled instantly. Mom, I never wanted this to happen, he said quietly. But you allowed it, I replied. That hit harder than shouting ever could. Because it was true. Tyler stepped forward again, still desperate. Grandma, we were trying to modernize the company. I nodded slowly, and removing me secretly was your solution. He stayed silent, because there was no good answer. I walked back to the table, placed both hands gently against the surface. Then I made my decision, effective immediately. I said calmly, Richard is suspended from executive authority. The room froze. Richard's face went pale. And Tyler, I continued, you are removed from all leadership training programs connected to this company. Tyler looked stunned. You can't do that, he shouted. I held his gaze. I already did. His confidence shattered instantly, because now he understood something important. The company wasn't his inheritance, it was my legacy, and legacy must be protected. Richard stood slowly. Mom, please. For the first time in years. His voice sounded small. I made mistakes, he admitted, but don't destroy everything because of this. Destroy, interesting word, because they almost destroyed me first. I took a deep breath, then softened slightly. I'm not destroying the company, I said quietly. I'm saving it. Silence again. But this family, I continued, needs to learn something before they ever lead anything. I looked around the room carefully. Respect. Nobody spoke, because nobody could deny it anymore. A few weeks later, the company changed completely. New structure, new rules, full transparency, and for the first time in years, people in the office stopped looking nervous around my family. Richard changed slowly. He apologized more than once. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly, honestly. Tyler struggled the most, because entitlement is difficult to remove from someone who inherited comfort. But eventually, even he began to understand, because for the first time in his life, he had to earn something. One evening, long after everyone had left, I stood alone in my office, the city lights glowing outside the windows, the same office they thought they could take from me. I looked at the chair behind my desk, my chair, and slowly, I smiled, not because I won, but because I refused to disappear, because age doesn't erase value, and silence doesn't mean surrender. I sat down calmly, looked out across the city one last time, and for the first time in years, I felt something simple, peace.